Hey guys, tonight we begin with something ancient, sandy, and slow, like drift off before the camel arrives slow. You're standing in the middle of a dry plain in West Africa, under a sky wide enough to swallow your worries whole. The horizon flickers in heat haze, and in the far-off distance you see movement. Not war drums, not royal banners. Just a few dust-covered traders leading donkeys that look like they've seen better centuries. You're barefoot. It's hot. The wind carries the dry scent of millet and smoke from someone's breakfast. You squint toward a line of thorny trees, where small huts cluster together like gossiping aunties. This is no empire, not yet. Just a collection of villages and whispers people surviving by farming sorghum and hoping the rains show up on time. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from? What time is it right now? Drop it in the comments. I always find it fascinating to see who's joining from across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward past a goat nibbling on something you're pretty sure isn't food. Children call to one another in a language older than most maps, their laughter mixing with the soft percussion of wooden pestles grinding grain in stone mortars. There's no sign yet of the mighty Mali Empire. That name hasn't even been spoken. You're walking through a time before things had official names, before kings, before boundaries, before the gold came pouring through. Mainstream historical fact. West Africa was already bustling with trade and agriculture before any empire showed up. People were growing rice, tending herds, mining iron, and running organized towns as early as 300 CE. Don't let the scrolls fool you. Civilization didn't need Roman columns to count. You pass a blacksmith shaping a blade with nothing but a small fire and the rhythmic puff of a goat hide bellows. Iron tools here aren't for conquest, yet they're for survival. Spoons, hoes, sickles, spears too, but only if someone steals your yams. The people here belong to many ethnic groups, the Soninka, the Mandinka, the Fulani. And they mostly get along. Mostly. Territory is fluid, alliances shift like sand dunes, and the idea of a nation is still a few generations away. But seeds are being planted literally and metaphorically. You take shelter under a neem tree, swatting away a fly the size of a thimble, and watch the world move at camel pace. Somewhere drums are calling a council meeting. Somewhere else, a man with a name you'll never know is carving a griot's staff. Somewhere even farther off, a young trader in a blue turban is learning how to navigate by starlight and the position of termite mounds. Quirky detail. Some of the early traders here used donkeys not just for carrying goods, but as living alarms. They'd bray like sirens if raiders came near, long before any humans spotted them. You shift your weight and scan the horizon. Nothing's coming. But you can feel it. Change. The kind that doesn't arrive with fanfare or fireworks, just the slow accumulation of little things. Safer trade routes, clever chiefs, growing villages, small bands of warriors who start calling themselves kings. Historians still argue whether the Mali Empire evolved organically from village coalitions or if it was more of a hostile takeover by ambitious rulers with good timing. Either way, the idea is forming somewhere out there. A child is being born who will turn this sleepy savannah into one of the richest empires the world has ever forgotten to mention in school books. You lie back in the shade, arms behind your head, and watch birds circle lazily overhead. No palace, no empire. Not yet. But the land is ready. The stories are gathering, and the ground beneath you hums with something that feels a lot like potential. You won't survive long out here if you're expecting roads or menus. But if you have patience, real sand between your toes kind of patience, you just might witness the beginning of something extraordinary. You sit up slowly, dust clinging to your elbows, and glance toward the northwest. That's where the old traders say another kingdom already hums, one rich with gold and governed by silent authority. They call it Ouagadougou, but you might know it better by its Greek given name, the Ghana Empire. Now don't get confused, this isn't modern Ghana. This is centuries earlier, somewhere in the region of southeastern Mauritania and western Mali. Ouagadougou is a shimmering mirage on the edge of your world, a realm of double kings, silent commerce, and wagons loaded with gold dust. And from your dusty village, it feels more like legend than news. Still stories arrive carried on the backs of donkeys in the mouths of griots or tucked into the travel-worn robes of merchants. Stories about kings with hundreds of dogs, each wearing golden collars. About a palace so full of treasure, it could make a Tuareg lose his sandals. You wonder if any of it's true. Probably not all of it. But something's real enough to make your neighbors glance westward with a mixture of awe and suspicion. See, your little settlement lies on the frontier, not in Ghana, not under its rule, but not quite beyond its reach either. You're one of those liminal people, the ones who live on the thresholds of empires, where borders are blurry and alliances are as shifting as desert dunes. And even here on the empire's periphery, Ouagadougou's shadow stretches long. Chiefs in your region have begun to mimic some of the Ghanaian king's customs, building bigger meeting halls, wearing more elaborate cloth, and most significantly demanding tribute from those who live even farther out. It's empire light. Just enough power to impress the neighbors, not enough to cause a rebellion. Here's your mainstream fact. The Ghana Empire flourished from around the 6th to 13th century CE, reaching its height well before Mali took the stage. It grew rich from taxing trade, especially salt, gold, and ivory, much of it carried along the trans-Saharan routes. And here's your quirky tidbit. The Ghanaian king had a habit of sitting in council with his face covered behind a curtain of silk or beads. Why? Part mystique, part power play, and partly because no one was allowed to see the king's face without permission. Very Wizard of Oz. You rise to your feet and wander toward the edge of a clearing where your neighbors have gathered around a trader. He's just returned from the Ghanaian frontier and unrolls his wares cloth dyed in indigo dried dates, a tiny brass bell. But it's the stories he sells that earn the most attention. He says that Ghana has grown bloated, that the king's court is so rich it barely notices the hunger in the provinces, that the old alliances are cracking, that the warriors from the North Almoravids, he calls them, have begun to sniff around the edges of empire like jackals near an injured gazelle. Historians still argue whether the Almoravid invasion really brought Ghana down, or if it was already declining due to internal fractures and ecological pressures. Some even claim the Almoravids never directly attacked the capital, but merely disrupted trade routes enough to starve it out. What's certain is this something is weakening Ouagadougou, and in that space, new ambitions are stirring. You walk back through your village as the sun starts to dip. The air smells like roasting millet cakes and dung smoke. Somewhere nearby, a hunter's horn blows long and low, and you pause. It's a warning or a welcome. Hard to say. Your own chief, wiser than he looks in that sagging straw hat, has started talking more often about unity. He calls it fanya, a kind of binding together like threads in a mat. He says that what holds us now is too weak, too scattered, that we need something stronger. You don't know if he's right. But the way the old empire's shadow stretches thinner each day, it's hard not to wonder what might come next. And while the grown-ups talk, the kids in the village play sundiata, pretending to be warriors, and witches dragging sticks like swords limping in imitation of the boy from the prophecy. You chuckle. It's just a game. But every story starts somewhere. Somewhere a boy is growing up under that name. Somewhere his limp is turning into legend. You lean against a baobab tree and close your eyes. The Ghana Empire isn't dead yet, but its pulse is slowing. And in the pause between heartbeats, Molly is listening. You wake to the sound of chickens arguing under a thatched roof and a slow drumbeat rising like breath from a neighboring compound. Something feels different this morning. The air's thick with chatter, low and excited. The old woman who normally ignores you has already told the same story to 3 different listeners, and now she eyes you like you're next. Everyone's talking about the boy. They say he was born during a thunderstorm, that the midwives screamed when they saw him. Not because of anything monstrous, no tail, no glowing eyes, but because he didn't move. Not a blink, not a wail. A silent, heavy baby placed gently in his mother's arms, like a clay pot too delicate to shake. You edge closer to the gathering. Today the griot, the village storyteller and memory keeper, is already seated on a carved wooden stool. His robe is indigo and fraying. His kora rests across his lap like an old friend. He begins not with a name, but with a riddle. What crawls like a snake, falls like a tree, and rises like the sun. You guess it's one of those dream riddles, the kind that don't need answers. But the griot knows it's Sundiata, the boy with the limp. He was born into the royal line of the small kingdom of Kangaba, son of Magan Konfata, and Sogolan, a woman said to have been given to the king by a hunter under mysterious conditions. Sogolan was no beauty by conventional standards. She had a hunched-back wild hair and a presence that unsettled the other wives. But the king believed in omens, and her son Sundiata was the promise of something great. At least until he turned 5 and still couldn't walk. Mainstream fact, Sundiata Keita is considered the founder of the Mali Empire. And much of what we know about him comes from oral tradition preserved by griots, especially the famous epic of Sundiata, still performed today across West Africa. But here's the fringe tidbit. Some versions of the epic claim that Sundiata's first step was so powerful it left a dent in the earth, and that afterward trees he passed began to bloom out of season. You imagine him as a toddler superhero summoning mangoes just by limping past. The griot leans forward and speaks softer now. He tells how the other children laughed at Sundiata, how even his half-brothers mocked him, how his mother bore the scorn silently, except for the nights she wept beside the fire. You feel the slow burn of injustice and hope it's headed for something satisfying. Then one day, no one agrees on the exact age. Sundiata asks his mother for an iron rod. Not a cane, not a stick, but something forged in fire. They say he gripped it with trembling hands, pulled himself up, and walked. Just walked. Limping, yes, but upright, determined. The rod bent under his weight, and the village bent under the weight of prophecy. Historians still argue whether Sundiata truly existed in the form passed down by griots, or if his story is a blend of several rulers exaggerated through time. What matters more than the facts, though, is the feeling. And that morning in your village, you feel it, the tremble of myth being born. You watch the children reenact it again, one leaning hard on a broomstick, staggering toward the horizon like a hero in the making. Adults nod. Some smile. A few look worried, because the story doesn't end with walking. The current king Sundiata's father is dead. His half-brother Dankaran Tuman takes the throne pushed forward by a scheming queen mother named Sasuma. She isn't thrilled about a rival prince with a fresh dose of destiny and a very public limp. You pass a clay wall scrawled with symbols, some of them prayers, others just markings left by curious hands. Behind it, people are packing. Not loudly, not in panic, but with a tension you can feel under your ribs. Exile, that's what happens next. Sundiata, his mother, and their few loyal companions are sent away. Some versions say it was voluntary, others that they were chased out by politics and whispers. Either way, they vanish into the scrubland carrying nothing but the weight of the boy, who couldn't walk until he could. You lie back that evening, fire crackling beside you, and stare at the stars. Somewhere out there, the boy with the bent rod is learning to survive in exile. Somewhere he's watching kings rise and fall, collecting friends, skills, enemies. Somewhere he's becoming a lion, and here under your mosquito net canopy of stars, you wait. Because a great return always starts with a quiet exit. The next time you hear his name, it's in whispers carried by traders and griots passing through dusty markets. They say Sundiata has grown tall. Still limping, still quiet, but now his stride makes even proud men move aside. And he's no longer just the boy who bent an iron rod. He's gathering people. You're older now, more dust on your sandals, more calluses on your hands. You've worked the millet fields, carried water from the river, heard enough stories to know that most rise and fall tales involve more falling than rising. But with Sundiata, there's a slow momentum that sticks in your bones. He's been gone for years. Moved from kingdom to kingdom, exiled in comfort or desperation, depending on who tells the story. In some places, he was welcomed as a guest of honor. In others, he lived quietly under assumed names. What's consistent? He watched. He learned. Mainstream fact exile was common for princes in West Africa, and it wasn't always a death sentence. Sometimes exile became education. Displaced royals were free to study the politics of other courts, observe different forms of rule, and quietly form alliances of their own. Sundiata isn't wasting his exile. By the time his name returns to your part of the savannah, he's said to be training warriors, advising kings, even marrying strategically. In one version, he gains a bow so strong only he can pull it. In another, he outwits a shape-shifting sorcerer. You don't know which is true, but all of it sounds like a man preparing for something bigger, and something is brewing. From the east, word comes that the sorcerer king of Soso Sumanguru Kante is on the move. He's no bedtime story, not the fun kind anyway. They say he's ruthless, dressed in iron and shadow, surrounded by skulls, and impossible to defeat. A former general turned King Sumanguru has taken over what's left of the Ghana Empire, now just a patchwork of towns and memory. Quirky tidbit Sumanguru is often described as having 8 heads, each whispering dark magic, and a fetish chamber filled with the dried tongues of conquered griots. It's probably poetic license. Probably. Still, even the elders don't joke about Sumanguru. He's crushed rivals, burned cities, and now he's heading toward Kangaba Sundiata's birthplace. The old kingdom. The place where he was once a silent baby and a banished boy. That's when messengers start arriving, exhausted, sand-crusted riding horses that barely stand. They bring word to Sundiata return. The elders, the nobles, even some former enemies, they want him back. Not just as a son, not just as a prince, but as a savior. Historians still argue whether this recall was truly unanimous, or if it was more of a desperate gamble by a few desperate villages. Some suggest Sundiata returned by force, others by invitation. What's certain is this: he didn't hesitate. You can almost see it, Sundiata standing on a hill somewhere, wind catching the edge of his cloak as he watches his homeland call him home. The exile becomes the returning hero. The wanderer, now with an army. The limping boy, now a lion. You squat beside a fire in your own village, stirring a pot of watery rice, and feel it in your chest change again. The kind that hums under your fingernails. Because Sundiata isn't coming back alone. He brings warriors hardened by exile allies, won through marriage and diplomacy, and most importantly, a reputation bigger than any crown. You see people follow stories. And Sundiata's story has the rhythm of prophecy. From the limp to the rod, the exile to the call home, it all feels written in stardust. That night, you can't sleep. Not from fear, from something stranger. Hope. You picture Sumanguru in his tower of bone and iron, looking westward with eyes that know what's coming. And somewhere beyond your reach, Sundiata is already gathering his generals, tracing his return with the deliberate pace of someone who's waited long enough. The drums have started again. Not the soft ones of ritual or harvest. These are deeper. Meant for marching, meant for remembering, meant for war. But don't worry, you won't be fighting. You're here to watch. To breathe it in slowly, to sleep through history while it unfolds one quiet footstep at a time. You rise before the sun and the sky, a muted gray, stretching like worn cloth over the savannah. All around you, people are on the move. Women tying bundles of millet and smoked fish to the backs of donkeys. Boys hauling jugs of water to the edge of the village. And warriors, yes, warriors, strapping on leather armor, adjusting slings, stringing bows with careful calloused fingers. Sundiata has returned. The griot says he came not in silence, not like a thief or a shadow, but like a sunrise, slow, golden, impossible to ignore. He crossed the borders of old Kangaba not with fanfare, but with a steady stream of supporters trailing behind him like a long winding river. Exile had not made him bitter. It had made him wise. And now he's building something. You stand at the edge of the gathering ground, a wide clearing dusted in red sand, and watch the beginnings of an army take shape. Not a professional army with shiny uniforms and polished swords, but a patchwork of villagers, hunters, smiths, and former outlaws. What binds them isn't discipline, it's belief. Belief in the boy who limped, in the man who returned, in the chance to build something new. Mainstream fact, after Sundiata's return, he united a confederation of smaller Mandinka states and defeated the Sasso king at the legendary Battle of Kirina around 1235 CE, marking the birth of the Mali Empire. But we're not at Kirina yet. We're at the slow start, the quiet hum of preparations. You see men testing spears sharpened over open flame. You see women weaving banners in saffron and russet, the old colors of resistance. You see Sundiata himself, yes, there he is, moving through the crowd, limping slightly, but radiating calm. He doesn't bark orders. He listens. He nods. He speaks softly to each clan leader, each elder, each blacksmith and bowyer. His presence isn't loud, but it's magnetic. He walks like someone who already sees the world he's building. There's a young boy near you mimicking Sundiata's walk, dragging his leg dramatically while his friends laugh and cheer. One of the elders scolds him gently, not because it's disrespectful, but because the story is sacred. Even the jokes must have shape. Sundiata gathers his generals. Not the type who wear crowns or carry jeweled swords, but those with deep scars and deeper loyalty. One is known for his unerring aim with a javelin. Another for tracking enemies by the tilt of bent grass. Another for singing battle songs that make opponents hesitate. And the griot, yes, he's here too. Sitting at the edge of the circle, plucking his kora, watching everything. Because what's about to happen won't just be war. It will be memory. And someone needs to capture it in song. You walk past the blacksmith's hut where sparks fly like fireflies. Horses are being shod. Spears fitted with barbed iron, leather softened and stitched for shields. The smith pauses to wipe his brow and gives you a wink. He knows. The whole village knows. There's tension, yes, but not the panicked kind. It's the taut silence before a drumbeat. Everyone senses it. The Sasso king won't surrender easily. He has numbers magic and the cold discipline of a man who's already burned cities to the ground. Quirky tidbit. Some stories claim Sumanguru could disappear into walls, that he could strike a man dead with a glance, and that he kept a live panther as a pet, probably not the most relaxing dinner guest. But the Mandinka aren't afraid. They've waited years for this. And Sundiata, he doesn't promise an easy road. He promises a future. Historians still argue whether the army he built was truly revolutionary in structure or if it followed traditional tribal alliances, repackaged for a larger campaign. But either way, what emerged wasn't just a resistance. It was a foundation. As evening descends, fires flicker across the plain. Families gather for a final meal before departure. There's no weeping, no speeches. Just quiet determination and the clink of wooden spoons and clay bowls. You lie on your woven mat eyes, open to the stars, the smell of charred millet and sweat in the air. The night is soft, but your mind is full, because tomorrow they march. Tomorrow the exile becomes a challenger. Tomorrow Mali begins to rise. The morning mist has barely begun to lift when you hear it, the drum. It's not loud, not yet. Just a low pulsing thump in the distance. A heartbeat for the entire plain. You sit up slowly, blanket of dew clinging to your sleeves, and realize it's begun. The march, the long, slow, determined rise of the Mali Empire, is officially in motion, and you're here to witness the first quiet steps. You shuffle to the road's edge and see them come not in chaotic masses, but in lines. Calm, steady, purposeful. Men with bows slung across their backs, women carrying bundles of grain to support the warriors, children perched on the backs of donkeys, wide-eyed and curious. This isn't just an army. It's a nation on the move. Sundiata rides at the center, of course. He's not armored like a king in a Western tale, no shining breastplate or flapping banners, but he wears a simple tunic, dyed deep indigo with amulets sewn along the collar. Protection, maybe. Symbol, definitely. Mainstream fact, Mande warriors often carried grey small amulets filled with verses or herbs tied to their clothing or weapons for spiritual protection in battle. These weren't mere decorations. They were considered essential companions to courage. You fall in step with a boy your age hauling a sack of dried fish. He tells you this is bigger than Kirina, that it's not just a battle, it's a reckoning. The old ways versus the new vision. Sumanguru's reign of fear versus Sundiata's promised justice. You nod, unsure how many details are true, but very sure the stakes are real. Along the way, people join in. Entire villages empty out to walk alongside Sundiata's force, offering yams, fresh water, even musicians. A woman with bells on her ankles dances in front of the troops for miles, smiling despite the heat. A blind elder taps out a rhythm on a hollowed gourd, keeping the pace. The road is long, and the pace is slow but steady. There's something almost meditative about it. The way the footsteps blend into a rhythm. The way the dust hangs just a little behind the last row of warriors, like the past reluctant to let go. You begin to feel lulled by it, the swish of cloth, the jangle of metal charms, the soft drone of a praise song echoing over the grass. Quirky tidbit. According to some oral traditions, Sundiata's soldiers were trained not just in weaponry, but in animal mimicry. A select few could imitate bird calls or jackal barks to send secret messages during battle. Imagine receiving instructions in the form of a convincing owl hoot. The sun is climbing now. Not scorching, but insistent. Every few miles, Sundiata's entourage stops to rest under baobab trees beside slow rivers in the shadow of termite mounds taller than 2 men. At one stop, a blacksmith sets up a forge right on the road, hammering out arrowheads as if it were just another Tuesday. Historians still argue whether Sundiata's army had formal supply lines, or if it operated more like a moving village sustaining itself on contributions and small-scale trade. Either way, what's clear is that this was no disorganized rebellion. It was a mobilization with a plan. By dusk, you reach a ridge overlooking a broad valley. In the distance, across a curtain of trees, lies the edge of Sasso territory. Sumanguru's reach. The path narrows now. The smiles fade just a little. Sundiata gathers his inner circle beneath a tall ghost-gray tree whose bark peels like old paper. You can't hear their conversation, but you see the gestures. A curved arm here, a line drawn in the dirt, a hand pressed to a chest in solemn promise. Then silence. The warriors sit quietly around the fires that night. No boasting, no war songs. Just the occasional cough, the hiss of meat on a stone, and the low murmur of strategy. You stretch out on your back and trace constellations that look nothing like the ones in modern books. One resembles a bow, another a lion. You wonder what Sundiata sees when he looks up. Not stars, probably. Futures. Territory. Legacy. Tomorrow, the first scouts will enter enemy land. And soon after, history will hinge on a battlefield known only in legend, Kirina. But for now, you sleep. Not out of comfort, but out of ritual. Because rest is part of the rhythm. And in Mali, even war has a certain grace to it. You wake to fog so thick it clings to your eyelashes, turning the world into a wet, whispering blur. Somewhere to the east, the sun is trying to rise, but for now everything is muted. The camp is quiet. No shouting, no clashing. Just the soft hiss of wet grass underfoot and the distant, deliberate creak of leather armor being buckled. Today is the day, not that anyone says it outright. No one has to. The silence says enough. You feel it in your ribs, that sense that the world is leaning forward, ever so slightly, holding its breath. The Battle of Karina is near. You follow the camp as it begins to shift. Horses are checked, spears re-wrapped with fresh leather grips, arrows sorted by size and feather type. No chaos, just ritual. Sandayata walks through it all with that same deliberate limp, speaking softly to his captains, running his fingers across the hilts of weapons offered in silence. His eyes don't blink much this morning. He's not performing. He's preparing. Mainstream fact: Karina was fought in 1235 CE, and it was the decisive clash that led to the end of the Sasso kingdom and the official founding of the Mali Empire. Sundiata's army was outnumbered, but tactically superior, and backed by a cause, not just a throne. By midday, the fog has burned off, revealing the rolling plains where it will all unfold. Karina itself isn't a grand place. It's a modest, open stretch of land near a bend in a river. No fortress, no towers, just fields of golden grass and scattered trees that will soon bear witness to something far from pastoral. You walk behind a group of scouts, their feet wrapped in cloth to move quietly. They point out Sumanguru's position, dark shapes in the distance, armor, glinting banners stiff in the rising breeze. The Sasso army is larger, better equipped, more experienced. But there's an unease to them, like a song played out of key. Sundiata's forces spread wide deliberately, drawing Sumanguru's troops into a stretch of land that narrows toward the river. You hear a low chant begin, nothing grand, just a rhythmic hum rising from the Mandinka soldiers. It's not a song of war. It's a lullaby of certainty. And somehow that's more unnerving. Quirky tidbit. Some versions of the epic say, Sundiata didn't just use warriors. He employed hunters with magical knowledge, charm-wielding griots, and even talking animals that carried warnings between the lines. You haven't spotted a chatty gazelle yet, but you're not ruling anything out. And then, without fanfare, it begins. A burst of motion from the Sasso side shields, raised spears thrust. Sundiata's army doesn't meet it head on. Instead, they flow around the charge, splitting into two wings, like a bird mid-flight. Dust rises. You cough. The world narrows to color and sound and movement. Historians still argue whether Sundiata used flanking maneuvers learned in exile or adapted local hunting techniques for battlefield use. Whatever the origin, it works. The Sasso lines buckle. You squint through the haze and catch a glimpse Sumanguru himself, high on a horse draped in iron and mystery. His face is unreadable, his presence immense. But something's off. He isn't shouting. He isn't leading. He's watching, waiting, maybe even worrying. The legend says Sundiata had a charm, a talisman crafted by his griot and hunters that neutralized Sumanguru's magic. Whether that's true or poetic metaphor, you don't know. But in this moment, it feels like the tide is shifting. Sundiata's troops close in, not in a frenzy, but like a tide coming in a slow, certain inevitability. You see shields raised to the rhythm of drums, spears glinting in the late afternoon sun. A horn sounds sharp and sudden. The Sasso line wavers. Then Sumanguru is gone, just like that. Vanished into the trees. Some say he fled. Others claim he melted into the shadows, never to be seen again. Either way, his army breaks. You watch it happen. A slow crumble, like an old wall giving in to wind and time. It's not glorious. It's quiet. Dust, feet retreat, and then silence, the kind that rings in your ears. the kind that only happens after something important has ended. You sink to your knees, not in grief, not in exhaustion, but in awe. You are here. You saw the hinge of history swing. Sundiata walks the field slowly, nodding to the wounded, lifting hands of survivors. No crown, no proclamation, just presence. The sun begins to dip, and a griot steps forward with his kora. He strums a few notes and begins to speak. Not shout, not sing, just speak. And so the lion returned. You close your eyes and exhale. The field at Kirina still smells like trampled grass and smoldering dust, but the battle is over. What remains is not carnage, it's clarity. You rise slowly, knees stiff from crouching, the weight of history thick in the air. Around you, warriors tend to wounds, collect arrows, and gather their dead with quiet reverence. There is no victory parade, just long shadows and longer thoughts. Sundiata walks through the haze like a man, both aged and reborn. People greet him not with cheers, but with open hands pressed to hearts, a silent language of respect. There's no throne waiting for him, not yet. But something has changed. The world now sees him differently. He's not just the man who returned, he's the man who won. Mainstream fact. After the Battle of Kirina, Sundiata was formally declared Mansa, meaning emperor or king. He didn't simply inherit a crown, he forged one through fire and grit. In the days that follow, you travel with the slow-moving column of returning warriors. The path is familiar, but the mood is different. Every village you pass sends out drummers and singers, not in manic celebration, but in stately procession. Songs bloom like wildflowers, each one adding a verse to the story. You hear variations of the tale already, how Sundiata called lightning with a whisper, how Sumanguru turned into smoke, how the river itself bent to the Mandinka cause. Truth and myth are already twining together, like roots in the soil. You pass the site where Sundiata was once exiled. Now it is preparing a feast. Quirky tidbit. Some oral accounts suggest that Sundiata requested a special porridge to be served at every village celebration, made with crushed baobab seeds and goat milk, something simple, humble, and easy to digest after battle. Whether it's true or not, you spot several old women stirring pots of creamy, fragrant mush and ladling it out with smiles. Historians still argue whether the Mali Empire began strictly at Kirina, or whether it took several more years to consolidate true imperial power. But symbolically, everyone agrees this was the birth moment. As the capital is chosen and Sundiata begins to establish a new political order, you witness the shift from myth to mechanism. Delegations arrive, leaders of smaller kingdoms, representatives of river traders, spiritual advisors, smiths, scribes, even hunters. They don't all speak the same language, but they all understand the center has moved. Power now flows from Sundiata's court. A gathering is held beneath the baobabs. Not just for war stories, but for structure. You sit on a low bench as the first pieces of law are laid out not as rigid edicts, but as communal affirmations. The Mandan Charter, they call it. A series of principles that affirm dignity, freedom, and order among the Mandinka people. Some claim it's one of the earliest declarations of human rights, long before ink hit parchment in Europe. You sip from a gourd of water and listen. The words aren't shouted, they're sung. Each line echoed, repeated, woven into memory. No parchment, no quill. Just rhythm breath and bone-deep belief. Later that night, fires burn high as griots begin their true work. Not simply to report, but to immortalize. Their kora strings hum with energy. Their words wrap around you like a blanket. Sundiata is now the Lion of Mali, and that title will never leave him. You sit beside an elder woman with silver in her hair. She passes you a small wooden token carved with a lion's face. For the future, she says. You don't ask what it means. As the moon climbs and the fires pop softly, you reflect not just on the battle, but on the rhythm of everything. The walk, the silence, The dust. The way people looked up, not out. The way power rose from patience, not ambition. And somewhere in the middle of that thought, you drift off not into sleep, but into stillness. Into the lull of something enduring. Morning breaks over a new Mali. You sit beneath a half-unfurled canopy, woven from dyed raffia and cotton, sipping warm tamarind water as the first rays of light spill across the red earth. Around you, the camp begins to stir. Not a war camp this time, but a court in transition. Sundiata is no longer a rebel in motion. He's an emperor in formation. And everything smells faintly of roasted millet and fresh plans. Servants move with practiced grace, setting down mats, arranging cushions, preparing for a long day of meetings. You're not on the battlefield anymore. You're in the heart of diplomacy now. Sundiata arrives without fanfare, wearing a robe of deep russet embroidered with abstract suns. He carries no weapon, just a staff capped with bronze. That in itself says more than any crown. Mainstream facts: Sundiata established Niani as the imperial capital of Mali. Though modest by today's standards, it became a thriving center of trade culture and governance in West Africa for over a century. Today's task: unification. Not through conquest, but through alliance. Representatives from a dozen surrounding regions have gathered. Some are former enemies. Some have never bent the knee to anyone. They're not all impressed. But they're all curious. You sit near the edge of the assembly, a leaf-chewing merchant on one side, a wary-looking elder from a desert caravan on the other. Everyone listens as Sundiata speaks, not loudly, but clearly. He doesn't promise riches. He promises order. Fair weights in the markets. Protection on the trade routes. A voice for the griots. A future made together. And somehow it works. Quirky tidbit. One of Sundiata's early decrees reportedly involved standardizing market days. Not to control commerce, but to ensure that villagers across the empire could anticipate and prepare for trade cycles. The concept spread quickly. After all, who doesn't like a calendar that tells you when to haggle? In the shade of a silk cotton tree, scribes with bark scrolls and iron-tipped pens begin to record who's pledging loyalty, who's sending tribute, who needs a marriage alliance or a border compromise. You wonder if they realize they're writing the first chapters of an empire that will someday stretch over 400,000 square miles. Historians still argue whether Sundiata's governance leaned more toward federation or monarchy. Some claim he was an absolute ruler with divine backing. Others believe his power was more ceremonial, balanced by councils and regional autonomy. The truth, as usual, probably lies somewhere in the dust between. In the afternoon, you visit the royal forge. Yes, forge. Because in Mali, blacksmiths aren't just tradespeople, they're revered. They hold spiritual weight. Their hammers ring with history and legacy. You watch as one woman with forearms like tree trunks shapes a ceremonial dagger for the new imperial guards. Every strike sends sparks into the humid air like fireflies. Later, under the mango trees, the griots return. Today, their songs aren't about battles. They're about beginnings. One sings of a boy who crawled long before he walked, of a mother who never gave up, of a lion that learned to wait before it pounced. You realize with a start that they're not just telling history. They're giving it roots, and you're one of the quiet witnesses. That night, as the new banners are raised, simple cloths dyed in black and ochre, you feel something shift inside you. This isn't just Sundiata's story anymore. It's become something bigger. Something that moves like the Niger, winding but steady. You wrap yourself in a blanket and listen to the crickets. The stars above seem unusually bright, even a little smug, as if they too had been waiting for this. The birth of an empire, you realize, isn't loud. It doesn't explode into being. It builds brick by brick, oath by oath, story by story. And the Mali Empire, it's only just getting started. The scent of dust and dried mango lingers in the air as you walk the packed earth paths of Niani. The capital is not grand in the way future empires will define grandeur, no marble colonnades, no towering fortresses, but it hums with a steady, lived-in rhythm. Markets unfurl like fans at dawn, and somewhere in the distance, a goat bleats with perfect comedic timing as a merchant overstates the quality of his salt bricks. You pass under a woven arch marking the central market. No gates, no guards, just a cluster of people who seem to know exactly where to stand, when to shout, and which shade of shade to lean into. The sun is already high, but no one rushes. Time here feels like a suggestion. Mainstream fact. Mali controlled major trade routes across West Africa, connecting the gold-rich forests of the south with the salt mines of the Sahara. These commodities, one gleaming the other crumbling, fueled one of the most powerful economies of the pre-modern world. You duck into a spice stall for some relief from the heat. Clay jars line the shelves, powdered ginger-dried hibiscus, fermented locust beans. The vendor grins and pinches a bit of powdered baobab fruit onto your tongue, sharp, sour, strangely refreshing. He says something about balance. The taste, like empire, must be both bold and steady. Out on the open street again, you hear the unmistakable jingle of camel bells. A caravan has arrived, kicking up a parade of red dust and excited children. Wicker baskets on their backs, the camels carry not just salt and gold, but gossip from faraway places. Tales of Tunisian scribes, Nile floods, and strange new coins minted in Marrakesh. One trader offers you a sample of something precious, gold dust sealed inside a small gourd. There are no coins here yet. Instead, people trade by weight, intuition, and reputation. The trust economy wrapped in cloth and carried on camelback. Quirky tidbit. In parts of Mali, gold was so plentiful that it wasn't worn as jewelry. It was often stored as powder in carved wooden jars and used sparingly, more for ritual or trade than decoration. Too much flash, after all, was considered in poor taste. At the edge of the market, you pass a group of young boys being taught how to spot a counterfeit nugget. They hold them up to the sun, tap them against clay tiles, even at one point, bite them gently. An old merchant chuckles. You must know gold by feel, he says, and thieves by their shoes. You make your way to the salt pavilion. Not made of salt, obviously, but housing thick slabs of it stacked like books on dusty shelves. These are from Tagaza, deep in the desert, and worth their weight in gold. You touch one. It's rough, flaky, and cold. How strange that something so dry rules so much of this world. Historians still argue whether the famed wealth of Mali was exaggerated by travelers like Ibn Battuta and al-Umari, or if their stunned accounts of streets paved in gold and emperors who gifted fortunes were in fact accurate reflections of the empire's staggering prosperity. Either way, the impression stuck. You wander into a quieter part of town as the heat peaks. The market's noise recedes into the background hum of birds, insects, and the occasional distant drumbeat. You find yourself outside a modest home with low mud walls and painted patterns in white and red. A woman sits in the shade, grinding millet. She looks up and nods at you, a trace of humor in her eyes, as if she knows the grandeur of an empire always comes down to work like hers. Nearby, a boy chases a goat. The goat is faster. You note the score. The streets wind like the Niger itself, looping and practical, shaped not by design, but by memory. People move in easy, practiced paths, water-fetching paths, neighbor-greeting paths, shortcut to market paths. You follow without needing to know where you're going. As dusk approaches, the town shifts again. Shadows stretch. Smoke rises from cook fires. You catch the aroma of something rich, peanut stew perhaps, with sweet yams and a hint of dried fish. A griot sets up near the well, his kora already tuned. Children gather, so do elders. You sit with them as he begins, not with Sundiata this time, but with the story of a girl who outwitted a crocodile and became a market chief. History in Mali is a wide river. It flows in more than one direction, And as the stars begin to blink open overhead, you realize something. This place is alive. Not because of its wealth, but because of how that wealth moves through stories, through salt, through song, through shared memory. And you're no longer just visiting. You're part of the market now, woven into the rhythm of footsteps on red earth. The morning light drips like honey across the courtyards of Niani, softening the sharp outlines of clay walls and casting long shadows of tamarind trees onto the ground. It's a slower morning than usual. There's anticipation in the air, like the stillness before a drumbeat. You stretch your limbs beneath a patchwork canopy, watching as people gather in clusters, murmuring about something big. Then you hear it. A hush falls, then a ripple of laughter, then gasps, and finally the metallic creak of loaded wagons. Mansa Musa is leaving, not fleeing, not retiring, embarking. You scramble up from your woven mat to catch a glimpse. Down the main path rolls a procession like no other, an imperial caravan setting out on what will become the most legendary pilgrimage in West African history. Horses draped in indigo and saffron, camels adorned with bells and brass, attendants, scribes, slaves, scholars, griots, cooks, and gold porters, hundreds of them, maybe more. You lose count around the sixth cart of finely embroidered cushions. Mainstream fact. In 1324, Mansa Musa, I undertook a Hajj to Mecca that stunned the Islamic world. His entourage numbered in the thousands and reportedly carried so much gold that its distribution along the way destabilized regional economies. A griot near you whispers that this journey will take years, that Musa has sworn to visit every major Islamic center between here and the holy cities, that his goal isn't just to worship, but to be seen, to represent Mali not just as a wealthy state, but as a pillar of the faith. You follow the procession a short distance, dodging donkey carts and gliding beneath date palms. Musa himself rides in a palanquin, a shaded litter balanced on the shoulders of his guards. His face is calm, focused. You catch only a glimpse, but that's enough. He doesn't look boastful. He looks deliberate. Quirky tidbit: Musa reportedly built mosques along the way, dropping funds in cities like Cairo and Medina like breadcrumbs of piety and prestige. In one Egyptian village, he paid to repair a collapsing well, then gifted the workers embroidered robes, and legend claims a goat per person. A goat. As the caravan rolls past, the locals don't just cheer, they adjust their prices. A melon you could have bought for 1 bead yesterday now costs 3. The price of everything rises with each camel load of gold that clinks and gleams under the Sahel's sun. Historians still argue whether the economic disruption caused by Musa's generosity was accidental or strategic. Some believe he genuinely sought to aid the poor. Others claim it was a calculated flex, a way to collapse weaker currencies and assert Mali's financial dominance without a single arrow drawn. By midday, you followed the caravan a few miles out of the city, now moving over the flatlands where shade is sparse, and every step stirs up golden red dust. There are tents for midday prayers, shade canopies for rest, and rows of clay jugs filled with tamarind water, spaced evenly like waypoints on a board game. A scholar walks beside you, muttering verses from the Quran, and occasionally glancing up at the sky as if checking for moral alignment. He tells you that Musa has brought not just gold, but architects' men trained in Andalusia, in Cairo, in distant cities, whose names you only half remember. He wants to build cities with memories in them, the scholar says, not just walls. You nod, unsure if he's speaking metaphorically or not. As dusk falls, the caravan sets up camp near a wide, slow-moving river. Tents rise in practiced coordination, and fires bloom in a constellation across the plain. Someone begins to sing, not a religious hymn, but a lullaby from back home. And just like that, this imperial journey shrinks into something tender, personal. You find a place by one of the smaller fires. A servant hands you a bowl of rice and okra stew, rich and sticky. You eat slowly, watching the silhouettes of camels against the firelight. There's laughter. There's prayer. There's the unmistakable creaking of a scribe's stylus scratching into a travel log. You lie back in the grass and look up. The stars are out again, bolder now, less timid than the ones you saw before the empire rose. And you think this isn't just a pilgrimage. It's a declaration, a sermon in footsteps, a golden line drawn from Mali to Mecca across the spine of the desert. And you, quiet and sleepy-eyed, are lucky enough to walk part of that line. By now, the dust of the pilgrimage has settled behind you. You're back in Nayani, or at least a version of it that feels subtly altered, its rhythms slower, its markets quieter, its courtyards dappled with the shade of new stories carried home on camelback. The city didn't travel, but it changed all the same. Empires, after all, don't just move across land. They ripple inward, too. You sit beside an open-air school listening to a teacher reciting poetry from memory. The words roll in Arabic wolof bambara, layered like woven cloth. A boy with ink-stained fingers practices his script on a tablet of smoothed wood. He glances at you briefly, then dips his stylus again. Mainstream fact. After Mansa Musa's Hajj, Mali saw a golden age of learning. Centers of Islamic education were established or expanded, particularly in Timbuktu, which would grow to rival even Cairo and Baghdad in scholarly reputation. The architecture begins to change too. You notice it as you wander the quieter quarters, mud brick homes capped with slightly more intricate latticework mosques, with stepped minarets and geometric designs doorways inlaid with imported wood. It's still Mali, but dressed for conversation with the world, and the world is listening now. Quirky tidbit. One of the architects Musa brought back from Cairo, an Andalusian named Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, was reportedly paid 200 kilograms of gold for his work in Mali. That's enough to build several mansions, or if you're less practical, one extremely uncomfortable golden canoe. Historians still argue whether al-Sahili truly introduced Islamic architecture to West Africa, or simply added ornamental influence to a vibrant pre-existing building tradition. Either way, the buildings that rise now seem to echo both the soil and the stars. You walk along the edge of a construction site, a new mosque, partially built with workers stacking sun-dried bricks in rhythmic harmony. A foreman slaps wet clay between two layers and hums something tuneless but comforting. Children carry small buckets of water from the well, supervised by elders who pretend to scold but mostly smile. Inside a shaded storage room, bundles of manuscripts are being cataloged, yes, manuscripts, on everything from law and astronomy to grammar and music. You run your fingers gently over a page detailing crop rotation schedules according to lunar cycles. Another page nearby holds verses of poetry shaped like birds in flight, and it hits you this empire isn't just surviving, it's thinking. You duck into a small madrasa, more a study nook really, where students are debating a passage of legal theory. The instructor doesn't lecture. He listens, nudging the discussion with a raised brow or a finger tapped lightly against his knee. The students wear robes of soft cotton eyes, bright with the kind of fatigue that only comes from caring too much about a footnote. You sit with them for a moment, pretending to understand. But mostly you absorb the feeling quiet, focused intensity. Minds stretching like fields toward the sun. Outside, you find a market stall selling ink and styluses. The vendor lets you smell the ink. It's sharp, fermented, earthy, made from soot, honey, and a bit of tamarind pulp. You consider buying one, then remember you don't have any gold dust tucked inside your robe. Or a robe. You pass a library in progress, shelves, still bare windows, yet to be shuttered, and watch as a young girl maps constellations onto the clay with a charcoal stub. Her father crouches beside her, drawing the lines that connect them. So you can find your way back. He says, though, you're not sure if he means home or something larger. Historians often debate how literacy was measured in empires like Mali. Was it religious fluency, the ability to recite legal precedent? the memory of hundreds of ancestral names in exact order? The answer seems to be yes to all of it. You end your stroll at the city's edge where the sun leans low over the horizon, painting the fields in gold and vermilion. A group of griots has gathered to rehearse a performance. They test different drum patterns, argue softly about pacing, swap verses and jokes. One of them spots you. You missed the best part, he says. But we'll sing it again tomorrow. History's like that, it always circles back. You smile and settle onto the grass, letting the sound carry you forward and backward in time. Mali now is more than a kingdom of wealth or territory. It's a kingdom of minds, of memory, of meaning. And you've become part of its memory too. The days roll by like slow drums in the distance. You wake again in Nyani, but this time with the scent of dust heavier in the air. There's a subtle shift in the wind, something you can't quite name. A change in the rhythm of footsteps, in the cadence of morning greetings. Even empires, it seems, get tired. You step into the square where elders gather to debate beneath the shade of broadleaf trees. Today the conversation is somber. Trade has slowed. A few caravans have gone missing in the north. There are rumors, not yet threats, just seeds of worry about raids along the edge of the empire. Mainstream fact. After its peak under Mansa Musa, the Mali Empire began a slow decline in the late 14th century, due in part to succession struggles, shifting trade routes, and rising powers in the region, like the Songhai. You stroll through the streets that once pulsed with market noise, now a little too quiet at midday. A blacksmith's fire still glows in the corner of his workshop, but fewer people stop by. A storyteller spins his tale, but the crowd is thinner, distracted. The story tonight is about a clever jackal who survives by moving with the grass fires. A griot whispers near your shoulder, "The empire is still strong." You nod. But you both know the truth. Strength is not the same as invincibility. Quirky tidbit. To avoid the embarrassment of official decline, later rulers of Mali began adding layers to their titles, long flowing honorifics, meant to remind everyone of their ancestors' glory. One Mansa reportedly introduced himself with over 20 names before getting to king. You walk to the edge of town where the river bends wide and see fewer boats than before. A trader sighs, saying the Niger's current no longer brings as many merchants as it used to. They go east now, he mutters. Toward Gao. Historians still argue whether the empire's fall was mainly due to external invasion or internal decay. Some point to the loss of Timbuktu to the Tuareg in 1433, while others blame a string of weak or short-lived rulers who couldn't hold the center together. Either way, the golden threads begin to fray. Threads. At the palace, repairs have slowed. The walls stand, but their fresh mud plaster peels in patches. The courtiers still speak with grace, still wear robes dyed in indigo and ochre, but their eyes flicker more quickly now, calculating. Even ceremony begins to feel like performance. You sit in the garden behind the palace and watch two boys practicing with wooden spears. One trips and falls but laughs. They have no idea the empire is faltering. And maybe that's the point. Life continues, even as banners fade. The schools still teach. The markets still hum. The griots still sing. But you hear more songs now that end on unresolved notes. You stop by a mosque being swept by an old caretaker. He straightens when he sees you and says, "When gold piles too high, it topples." You don't know if he means the actual economy or something larger, but he chuckles and walks away before you can ask. That evening, the sky burns orange-red as you sit on the walls of Niani. Out there beyond the city are new kingdoms rising. The Songhai wait in the wings. You know they'll come. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. The empire isn't gone. Not yet. It still breathes. But it breathes like a man who remembers running. And maybe as you fall asleep under that coppery sky, the most Mali thing you can do now is remember carefully, deeply, deliberately, not just the rise, not just the gold, but the long, slow song of what came after. You're still here drifting now through a quieter Mali, where grandeur gives way to memory, and the everyday becomes the empire's true heartbeat. The pace has softened, but not stopped. You find yourself in Timbuktu, this time drawn not by gold or camels, but by something more fragile parchment. You walk beneath crumbling archways into the famous Sankore district, where mud brick buildings lean gently inward as if sharing secrets. It's quieter than the markets you remember, but not silent. The rustle of paper, the murmur of recitation, the scratching of pens on pages. This is a different kind of empire, ruled by ink. Mainstream fact. During its golden age, Timbuktu was home to over 180 schools and universities. Scholars from across Africa and the Islamic world journeyed here to study law, astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy, some institutions holding thousands of manuscripts. You enter a low-ceilinged room where a dozen students sit cross-legged in rows, their styluses poised above wooden slates. The air smells of ink, sweat, and tamarind. A teacher drones softly from memory, quoting a 10th century geographer. One boy falls asleep, upright stylus still in hand. The teacher lets him be. Even knowledge apparently understands exhaustion. Stacked high on a shelf behind them are scrolls and books, bindings of goat hide and palm twine ink, faded but intact. One is open on a low table nearby. It diagrams lunar phases using concentric circles and dot clusters. You stare too long and lose track of time. Quirky tidbit. Many manuscripts were passed down through families and hidden in clay pots during invasions or political shifts. Some were even buried beneath homes, and only recently rediscovered, meaning some of the world's oldest libraries were technically underground storage units. You sit with a librarian who shows you how to clean and prepare old parchment. It involves oilcloth and more patience than you thought humanly possible. She tells you the manuscripts are never truly owned, just temporarily protected. We are borrowers, she says, even from the past. Outside, the air buzzes with heat. You pass through a sunlit courtyard where students debate the ethics of leadership. One argues that wealth should serve wisdom. Another counters that wisdom can't exist without stability. You don't interrupt. This is a centuries-old conversation, and it will outlive you. Historians still argue whether the libraries of Timbuktu influenced global knowledge or remained mostly isolated. Some suggest links between these texts and medieval European medicine, while others claim the knowledge stayed regional, deep, but localized. The truth, as always, likely lives somewhere in between. You wander through a small market where merchants now sell paper alongside spices. A young man offers you a sheet of thin, hand-pressed parchment for less than the price of dried fish. You buy two. They smell like earth and effort. Toward evening, you sit beneath a fig tree listening to a blind griot play the Ngonia lute with a voice like falling water. His fingers move with practiced grace, plucking out melodies older than the empire itself. Between songs, he sips hibiscus tea and mutters that writing is good, but music remembers what ink forgets. You nod, though you're not entirely sure what he means. As night descends, the lamps in Sankore flicker on one by one. The city glows in amber light, as if burning from within, not with fire, but with thought. Mali may no longer dominate trade, but it hoards something rarer, now wisdom. And in this twilight moment, surrounded by books and music and soft-spoken debates, you realize that some empires don't fall. They just become libraries. You wake to a low rumble, not thunder, but drums. Not war drums either. The kind played at ceremonies you're not invited to. At least, not directly. You slip into the outer courtyard of a noble compound where guests arrive draped in rich cottons dyed in rust and sapphire sandals whispering on polished stone. The air is thick with incense and gossip. A servant whispers near the doorway that the emperor is ill. Again. You raise your eyebrows. Again. Mainstream fact. After Mansa Musa's death, The Mali Empire suffered from a period of unstable succession. Several rulers held the title of Mansa in quick succession, some lasting only a few years, some less than one. You find a perch on a shaded ledge and watch as a procession begins inside the great hall. There's no mourning yet, just anxiety. Mali's rule, for all its gold and glory, depends heavily on the strength of whoever holds the throne. And when that throne starts wobbling, everyone feels the tremor. Quirky tidbit. Some rulers, like Mansa Maga Musa's own son, took power through inheritance. But others were appointed by consensus among court officials, leading to intense behind-the-scenes maneuvering. In one case, a royal was reportedly crowned, while the previous Mansa was still alive, and also still ruling. A griot passes by, humming a tune about the emperor who slept too long. You're not sure if it's metaphor or insult. Could be both. Satire in song form has always been a griot's gentle blade. Inside the palace walls, the inner circle debates quietly. You can't hear the words, but you can read the tone, urgency laced with formality, fear wearing a mask of calm. One advisor paces. Another scribbles something on parchment and folds it tightly. Historians still argue whether these unstable transitions were due to weak leaders or a flawed succession system. Some believe Mali lacked a clear protocol for passing power, while others suggest that the imperial court was simply too factionalized. Too many generals, too many griots, too many ghosts. You wander the streets of Niani later that afternoon and notice more guards than usual at key intersections. They're not hostile, just watchful. You pass a bakery where the woman at the counter hasn't baked her usual millet cakes. Waiting to see what happens, she mumbles. In the mosque courtyard, a scholar folds up his manuscripts early. Uncertainty makes for poor thinking, he says, shaking his head. And poor sleep. You nod sympathetically, he's not wrong. That evening, lanterns burn later than usual across the palace complex. A mule arrives at dusk with a sealed message from the north. You're not close enough to read it, but the expression of the gatekeeper who receives it tells you it's not good news. His lips press into a tight line, and the scroll vanishes behind the stone doors. Later that night, you climb a low hill above the city. From there, the glow of Niani flickers below you like the last coals of a fire. Once it burned bright with ambition. Now it simmers with tension. Succession doesn't just determine who wears the crown, it sets the rhythm for everything else. Trade taxes, education, diplomacy. When it stutters, the empire holds its breath. And so do you. You lie back in the grass, eyes tracing the Milky Way above, wondering who will wake up Mali tomorrow, and whether the people will believe in that choice. The stars don't answer, of course. But one of them falls briefly across the sky. You make a wish, not for gold or greatness, but for stability. Morning returns to Mali with a cooler breeze and the soft thunk of pestles at work. Life, despite everything, continues. You're in the courtyard of a family compound, watching 3 women crush millet in tall wooden mortars. The rhythm is steady, hypnotic, thunk, thunk, pause, switch, hands, thunk again. You could fall asleep, just listening. One of them laughs, adjusts her scarf, and says something about the new Mansa. You don't catch every word, but you gather he's young. Very young. The others exchange glances. One mutters, "Let's hope he listens better than he talks." Mainstream fact. Over the decades following Musa's reign, power in Mali became increasingly decentralized. Regional governors, known as farbas, began asserting more autonomy. The empire didn't vanish overnight. It unraveled like an old robe, slowly thread by thread. You walk down the main street of a smaller provincial town, maybe Walata, maybe Jenny. It's hard to tell these days. The buildings are familiar, but the accents shift, the greetings vary, and the loyalties, well, they're local now. Quirky tidbit. Some governors went as far as striking their own coins or minting local seals, quietly asserting that their authority came from ancestors, not emperors. Mali still existed on maps, but increasingly it was a patchwork of allegiances rather than a single unified body. You sit with a village chief who offers you a drink of sour baobab juice. He speaks softly of taxes sent to the capital sometimes. If the road's safe, he adds with a shrug. And if the messenger's honest. Historians still argue whether this regional independence was tolerated by the central government or simply ignored out of necessity. Was it a sign of practical governance or the beginning of imperial collapse? Both theories get nods depending on which scholar you ask and how much tea they've had. In the marketplace, traders haggle over salt bricks and indigo cloth. But there's less gold passing between hands these days and more barter. A pot of shea butter for a stack of fish. A bolt of fabric for a polished gourd. The economy hasn't collapsed, but it's definitely stopped showing off. You pause to admire a griot's performance near the edge of the market. His song isn't about kings or battles. It's about a clever fox who fools a lion into sitting on a beehive. Everyone laughs. The metaphor is lost on no one. Later, in a rural village nestled between low hills, you're invited to a naming ceremony. The baby is tiny, swaddled in kente cloth, his name whispered into his ear by a grandmother who's seen more empires rise and fall than she cares to count. The villagers dance, eat, sing. It feels timeless, and that's the strange thing. Even as the empire frays, the culture holds. Mali as a centralized state may be dimming, but Mali as a people Mande-speaking, drum-carrying storytelling remains vivid. You walk past a carved stone well where children draw water, the bucket creaking softly as it rises. One boy waves at you, grinning through a mouthful of roasted groundnuts. You wave back. He doesn't care about emperors. He cares about lunch. That night, you camp near a grove of shade trees, the stars above, winking through a haze of wood smoke. You hear laughter from a nearby fire. Someone's telling a story, no doubt involving a hyena doing something it shouldn't. And as you drift off under your blanket, you wonder if maybe this is the secret. Not every fall is a failure. Some are just transitions. Maybe Mali isn't dying. Maybe it's evolving. The dry season arrives like a quiet decree. The rivers thin. The air sharpens. The soundscape shifts from croaking frogs and rustling grass to the crackle of dust beneath sandals and the soft creak of ox carts over hardened earth. You find yourself on the trade road between Niani and Gao, though no one calls it that anymore. The road is still used, but its loyalties have changed. You sit in the shade of a wind-worn acacia, sipping warm water from a gourd, as a caravan passes a slow, rhythmic parade of camels, goats, and traders wrapped in layered robes of saffron and deep blue. Their direction, east. Always east. Mainstream fact. As Mali's influence declined, the city of Gao, once a tributary, rose to prominence. It would eventually become the heart of the Songhai Empire, eclipsing Mali in wealth, territory, and military might. One trader pauses beside you, offers a strip of dried mango, and says, "You're headed the wrong way." You raise an eyebrow. "Mali is old," he says simply. "Songhai is hungry." And then he moves on. Quirky tidbits: Songhai rulers like Sunni Ali were known not only for their military prowess, but also for their efforts to reclaim former Mali territories, with campaigns so swift they reportedly included war canoes racing upstream at night. You reach the edge of what was once a military outpost, crumbling towers of sun-baked mud, their outlines softened by time and wind. No guards greet you. No banners wave. Just a lonely goat chewing something it probably shouldn't. A local elder sits in the remains of the old garrison, sharpening a knife slowly. "They came through last year," he says, "of the Songhai patrols. Didn't burn anything. Just left a flag." He gestures toward a torn scrap of indigo hanging from a pole. Historians still argue whether Mali's decline was due to external conquest or internal neglect. Some say the Songhai expansion was inevitable, a cycle of empires. Others insist Mali could have survived longer had it adjusted faster, shared power better, or simply picked fewer fights with neighbors. You continue east and arrive in Gao itself, bustling, sun-bleached, and undeniably ascendant. Its markets smell of smoked fish salt and ambition. There are echoes of Mali here. Griots still perform manuscripts, still whisper in libraries. But the accents are different, the songs a little sharper. At the riverside, you see young men training with spears in formation. One yells a command you don't recognize. They respond in perfect unison. You wander into a mosque courtyard, older than it looks, where a teacher draws geometric diagrams in the sand. His students nod solemnly. Mali taught us gold, he says when you ask. We teach ourselves now, and you understand. The torch has been passed grudgingly, quietly, and without applause. Still, Mali lingers, in stories, in architecture, in the cadence of markets and the designs of cloth. Even here in Gao, you spot bracelets etched with the crescent mark of Niani craftsmanship. A trader insists it brings luck. You don't argue. You find a griot perched outside a tea shop, humming a new song. It's not about Mali's fall or Songhai's rise. It's about a clever bird who nests in the tallest tree, but never forgets where she learned to fly. That night, you sit beneath the stars, once again, a little farther east than before. The empire you followed is no longer the power it once was, but its roots run deep. And in the soil of new kingdoms, those roots still shape what grows. You breathe in the dry air, hear the rustle of wind through thorn trees, and understand the story of Mali doesn't end here. It just leaves footprints in the dust for someone else to follow. You wake the next morning to the faint scent of wood smoke and shea oil. Your breath a slow fog in the cooler air of Kangaba's hills. There's no trumpet of empire here, no golden banners or proclamations, just the slow, sure heartbeat of memory still alive beneath a sky that forgets nothing. As the village stirs, you watch a group of young boys practicing dances near the baobab grove, mimicking the elder drummer's footwork. One stumbles and falls. Everyone laughs, including him. There's joy here, unremarkable, but real. Today you're invited to walk with one of the village's caretakers to an old, overgrown mound at the forest's edge. It's a tumulus, maybe a burial site, maybe just a landmark. No one's quite sure anymore. But they tend it anyway, sweeping leaves from the stone base, leaving offerings of millet or kola nuts. A little shrine stands nearby, clay figurines tucked beneath its shelf like sleeping guardians. Mainstream fact: across West Africa, sacred mounds and ancestral groves have been maintained for centuries long after their exact histories were forgotten. They act less as monuments and more like spiritual placeholder spaces where continuity feels tangible even if specifics are not. You crouch beside the shrine and run your fingers over the smooth stones. They're warm from the sun. Lichen curls along the seams. A carved pattern faintly resembling a crocodile coils beneath your palm. Keita, the caretaker, says softly. You nod. There's no need to ask which one. They all end up here eventually, in story or in soil. Quirky tidbit local tradition holds that some griots carry tiny stones from these mounds in their belts during performances. It's not superstition, they insist it's memory insurance. You walk back through the village, passing a weaver's workshop, where indigo-dyed cloth flaps in the breeze. The women joke as they work, teasing one another over crooked hems and crooked husbands. You smile. In some ways, nothing changes. Historians still argue whether Mali's twilight era, its fading into regional obscurity, was unusually peaceful compared to other empire collapses. There were no massive civil wars, no final battle, just a gentle dimming, a shift from empire to echo. In the evening, you help gather wood for a communal cooking fire. The meal is simple fufu sauce with okra and fish-roasted plantains. Children weave between the adults, collecting stories as naturally as they gather fireflies in their hands. A griot begins to play again. Tonight's tale, a crocodile who outlived every king by pretending to be a rock. You chuckle. You've heard this one before. It ends with a crocodile biting a general's toe, slow history, fast teeth. Later, lying on a woven mat outside your hut, you stare at the stars again. There's something ancient in their rhythm, something steady. Mali is no longer a place of gold caravans and imperial might. It's something quieter now, but not smaller. Presence, you remember, the griot's word. And as the music fades, the drums fall still, and the breeze nudges your dreams forward, you feel it. The Mali Empire is gone, but it is also everywhere. Hey guys, tonight we end our journey, not with a grand finale, not with a coronation or a crumbling palace, but with something softer. You're standing once more on the red earth of West Africa. The stars wheeling overhead, and beneath your bare feet, the last echoes of an empire that once hummed with gold poetry and purpose. The fire's gone low. The village is asleep. But the land remembers. You walk alone through the edges of Kangaba, past the fields now resting past the river whose banks have narrowed with the season. There's no border here, no marker saying, here ends Mali. The end wasn't an event. It was a season. Mainstream fact. The Mali Empire's political power collapsed by the early 17th century, overtaken by rising neighbors, fractured by internal disputes, and worn thin by time. Yet the cultural and spiritual legacy of Mali persisted long after its imperial structures dissolved. You pass a grove of calabash trees, their yellow fruits round and heavy. Some are used for instruments, some for bowls. Some are carved with intricate designs and passed down through families as heirlooms. You run your hand over one drying on a low shelf. Etched into its side is a lion not fierce, but regal watching. You sit beside a dried stream bed, the cracked mud pale beneath the moonlight. In your mind, the names pass through like whispers: Sundiata, Mansa Musa, Ibn Battuta, the griots, the traders, the builders, the mothers, the farmers, the ducks. All of them part of the same quiet rhythm. Quirky tidbit. Some modern descendants of the Keita clan still claim a direct lineage to Sundiata. One man reportedly carries a charm made from an old brass coin and a lion's tooth. He insists it protects not just his body, but his memory. You glance behind you and see no footsteps. But you know you've come far. Historians still argue whether Mali's greatest legacy is economic, intellectual, or symbolic. Some point to Timbuktu's libraries, others to the vast trade networks. Others still say it's the resilience of oral tradition that kept Mali alive, even when the map stopped showing it. But tonight you decide Mali's greatest legacy is permission. Permission to imagine an empire where gold and wisdom were equally prized, where rivers were roads, where stories were currency, where silence was never emptiness, it was space to remember. As you make your way back to the village, a breeze catches the hanging cloth of the weavers' huts. It flutters like a banner, unofficial, unclaimed, but still waving. You lie down beneath the baobab tree one last time, and the world seems to fold in around you. The sky lowers, the earth softens, the air holds its breath. You feel your breath slowing now, each inhale softer than the last, each exhale like the pages of a forgotten manuscript being turned by gentle fingers. The firelight of memory glows low, steady, not gone. You imagine the griots still playing somewhere in the distance, the low hum of a kora trailing off into the trees. The empire may have ended, but its rhythms continue through footsteps in dust, through stories passed on mats at twilight, through lullabies sung beneath stars older than any king. Let your mind drift now, not to battles or crowns, but to the rustle of millet, the hush of a river at night, and the soft swish of a lion's tail moving through tall grass. The Mali Empire is behind you now, but its song lingers, and as you close your eyes, it cradles you, ancient, vast, and impossibly gentle.